Did you know that the same company that made the stop-motion holiday classics like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer
Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?
also made the animated Hobbit movie?
Bilbo Baggins? Yes? I am looking to hire a burglar.
Well, in case you didn't know, Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass partnered up in 1960 to form Rankin & Bass Productions, and would go on to make dozens of animated projects between movies, TV series, and specials. Most of us are familiar with their stop-motion animation, but Rankin & Bass actually produced tons of animated projects. They directed many of these projects, but most of the actual animation was outsourced to Tokyo, Japan. In fact, one of the main studios they used for traditional animation was called Topcraft. But when it eventually closed, one of their employees, Hayao Miyazaki, just happened to go on to establish Studio Ghibli. It's pretty hard to argue that Rankin & Bass's most famous work is their holiday specials, which were so successful that they've been airing on TV every single year since 1964. And it all started with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. This was based on the song everyone had come to know, which was actually based on a poem. But the poem and the song aren't really that long, and Rudolph is an hour-long special. So what did Rankin & Bass do? Lore dump. You thought the reindeer games were for fun? No, they determine your whole future. You have to impress Coach Comet or you'll never amount to anything. You can tell he's a coach because of this little hat and whistle.
Here comes the coach. My name is Comet.
And Rudolph's whole motivation comes from trying to impress Clarice.
I think you're cute. I'm cute. I'm cute.
But Rudolph isn't the only misfit around here. There's also Hermie, an elf who wants to become a dentist.
You don't like to make toys!
No. Someday I'd like to be a dentist.
Together, they're both so humiliated that they run away from home and meet a prospector named Yukon Cornelius. Sure, why not? He's always licking his pickaxe, which I guess is how prospectors would know if they found gold or not. They almost get eaten by the abominable snowman. Then get to the island of misfit toys where they might finally belong.
How would you like to be a spotted elephant?
Or a choo-choo with square wheels on your caboose?
But turns out that abominable snowman isn't just some dumb monster because he's carefully targeted who Rudolph loves most by kidnapping his parents and potential girlfriend.
Why doesn't he get it over with?
But eventually, Hermie is able to use his dentistry skills to pull the snowman's teeth out. And then Yukon sacrifices himself to defeat the creature.
Yukon!
Bet you didn't see this one coming though. Yukon survived and bent the abominable snowman to his will.
Here's the man, and here's the beast. Looky what he can do.
And then after all that, when a storm hits, Santa realizes he could use Rudolph's nose as a tail light, but in the front.
I mean, that nose of yours, that nose.
And audiences ate this up. It was so successful that families have been watching this special for 61 years. It holds the crown for the longest running Christmas TV special in the US. It's pretty hard to deny the impact it had. This specific visual style is now forever tied to Christmas and has been directly referenced many times. So obviously Rankin & Bass planned to continue making stop-motion holiday specials. Over the next 20 years, they would release 18 Christmas specials, almost half of which were stop-motion. Aside from Rudolph, the ones that are considered the most successful were 1970's Santa Claus is Coming to Town,
You better watch out, you better not cry, you better not pout, I'm telling you why.
and 1974's The Year Without a Santa Claus.
I'm Mr. White Christmas. I'm Mr. Snow.
And like Rudolph, these have continued to air every single year since they came out. They also continue to follow the same format that Rudolph did, where they take a famous, well-known Christmas song or story and then create a super in-depth backstory to it, which might give us more of a clue as to why they felt capable of telling a more complex story. Because in 1977, Rankin & Bass turned their sights to something a little more ambitious when they chose to adapt J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit.
The greatest adventure is there if you're bold.
This went back to traditional animation and was done by Topcraft, the studio I mentioned earlier. But the adaptation was written by the same guy who did most of the holiday specials, Romeo Mueller. It aired as a special TV movie with a brisk 78-minute runtime, which is pretty impressive next to the live-action Hobbit trilogy's 7 hours and 54 minutes to tell the same story. The response was mixed, but it's become a cult classic today. And you might think, well, if Rankin & Bass did the animated Hobbit, surely they did the animated Lord of the Rings that came out the next year. And you'd be wrong. But they did do the animated Return of the King in 1980. After The Hobbit was successful, Rankin and Bass wanted to do a sequel, but another company was already releasing an animated Lord of the Rings. It was intended to be a 2-part adaptation, and this first movie covered the first 2 books, The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers. But even though the movie was financially successful, the company canceled the second part after a disagreement with the filmmaker. So Rankin and Bass did this kind of hilarious thing where they just sort of used a movie that wasn't theirs to make another sequel with The Return of the King. It's not a literal follow-up to the other animated Lord of the Rings. The different visual styles between Rankin and Bass and the other studio are obvious, but Rankin and Bass's Return of the King just conveniently skips The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers, with a brief summary at the beginning of the movie. They claimed that The Return of the King was storyboarded before The Lord of the Rings came out, but come on. So when you sit down to watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer this year, you can tell everybody how the animation was actually done in Japan, how at one point Rankin and Bass employed the same man that made Spirited Away, and how they basically made a Tolkien trilogy without even having to make one of the movies. So let me know which is your favorite Rankin and Bass special, and happy holidays.